Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Today we start the chapter which is 5090 O level biology, and this is chapter 15, which is relationships of organisms. So, here we're going to talk about relationships of organisms, and this is, of course, the chapter we also call ecology. And I don't think you all like this chapter very much because it's all very confusing, and I hope I can make it a little better and you can understand it a little better. As you can see on the first page, I've put in basically you've got to have a producer, you've got to have a consumer, and then you've got to have another consumer, and then you've got to have just another consumer, another consumer. And here, of course, this would be a food chain. So, this would be a food chain which we are looking at. And as we elaborate on it, I want you to be looking around when you see nature and walk in a forest, or you're walking just amidst some trees. You can see these things, and I hope you all can observe this and you're now more conscious of it. Now, the first and the foremost thing is that we do is we look at the syllabus, and the syllabus says relationships of organisms. I mean, we talk about a lot of relationships these days, the social media and all that brings up relationships of organisms with one another and with the environment. And I often say that if I had to be given a chance to live my life again, I would probably become an ecologist and study ecology. I mean, it's so interesting. So we're going to be discussing energy flow, food chains and food webs, carbon cycle, nitrogen cycle, parasitism, effects of humans on the ecosystem, pollution and conservation. So these are the different headings that we need to be looking into. But then we look at the learning outcomes. And the first three which I want to discuss, in fact the first four, state that the sun is the principal source of energy input to biological systems. Now this is the first one. You see, without any sun, we would be lost. Sun, S-U-N, sun, not S-O-N, sun. So the reason is that if there is no light, there'll be no photosynthesis, there'll be no oxygen, and of course the heat part of it is as well. So that's what's mentioned in the Quran, that between the earth and the sun there'll be a barrier. एक दीवार हायल हो जाएगी, and that will be the end of this earth. So there will be a barrier between the sun and the earth, and that will be the end of this. The reason being is that in every food chain, in the beginning we have a producer. So the producer is always a plant, and an organism that makes its own organic nutrients, usually using energy from sunlight. Usually, you see, these are photosynthetic organisms. Photo means light. So they convert light energy into chemical energy. Yes, there are some organisms which can convert chemical energy into chemical energy. So those are called chemosynthetic. There are very few, but the majority is photosynthetic. Now, this is a very good diagram which explains a whole lot of stuff. Number one, it shows you what are the levels. Now, the levels is number one, producer. Number two, herbivore. Number three, carnivore, and then another carnivore. And the important thing is that this is the first feeding level. Feeding level means the first trophic level. So producer, the plant, will always be the first trophic level. And then of course we have the second trophic level will be the herbivore. The herbivore which is going to be eating that plant, or which is also called the primary consumer. So three names: second trophic level, herbivore, and primary consumer. All would mean the same thing. So producer, there's no such thing as primary producer and secondary producer. That's all rubbish. Please don't ever write that in the exam. There is only one producer, which is the one which is going to convert light energy into chemical energy. So herbivore would be the primary consumer, which is actually the ones which is going to eat the plant. So primary consumer is also a word we use, herbivore is also a word that we use, and the second trophic level is also used. So there are three words for the same level: herbivore, second trophic level, primary consumer. Then we have the third trophic level, which is the secondary consumer. and then we have the tertiary consumer. So producer 1, primary consumer 2nd, secondary consumer 3rd, and tertiary consumer 4th. And this of course makes it the same as the trophic levels. First trophic level is producer, second trophic level is the primary consumer, third trophic level is the secondary consumer, and the fourth trophic level is the tertiary consumer. So please understand this is the levels that we talk about. Trophic levels are called the feeding levels. Trophic levels are called the feeding levels. So producer, first trophic level is the feeding level. Herbivore or primary consumer, second trophic level. Secondary consumer is also carnivore. I mean, as you can see here in the first we have the grass, then we have the mouse, then we have the snake, and then we have the hawk. So 4 levels and 4 feeding levels. Now another Arctic tundra energy pyramid, and you can see how the energy is 100%, then 10%, then 1%, then 0.1%. And this would be the producer, this would be the primary consumer, this would be the primary consumer, and then we have the secondary consumer here, and then of course here we have the tertiary consumer. And this of course would be the first trophic level. Producer is always the first, then the second is the primary consumer, then the third, and the fourth. Now you see how energy is lost as we go along the trophic level. So there was 100%, then 10%, then 1%. Only 10% of energy is passed on to the next trophic level. And we'll discuss this in detail, how and why that happens. Another food chain, an Arctic food chain. I like you to see these because I want you to know the names of these different. So planktons would be the plants. The planktons would be the plants because that would be the producer. The krill is the tiny fish, then we have the silverfish, then we have the leopard seal, and then we have the orca. So these names, as you become a keen biology student, you must know these names. You must know the names of all these animals. Maybe some of them are difficult, but at the time you will learn all of them. I mean, not that I know all of them either, but I'm sure you all will learn if you sort of are focused and you keep on looking at these different food chains and their diagrams. Then let's look at what is a food web. A food web is a complicated, many food chains interconnected. Like you see here, this flowering plant, there's corn, these are all the producers, lavender and mangoes. And then the fruit fly, which on these mangoes is going to suck the phloem sap and is going to live off it. Then the fruit fly is eaten by the thrush. So you see the arrows are showing you which is the predator and which is the prey. So the thrush feeds on the fruit fly. The thrush feeds on the dragonfly. So the energy from the dragonfly is going into the thrush. Then the eagle feeds on the thrush. So the energy, because its food is going into the stomach of the eagle, so the eagle gets its energy from that. So a food web is a number of interconnected food chains. Like if I say one food chain, I would say corn, grasshopper, rat, and then eagle. So this is just one food chain. But then these are lots of interconnected food chain because the rat is eaten by the wolf as well as the eagle as well as the python. So the poor rat has a lot of predators because you see the arrows coming out of it. And the frog is also, and the python is a bit of a mean and nasty snake because look at how much it's getting his energy from. So it's getting his energy from a whole lot of stuff, from a whole lot of other animals. Frogs, python also eats the frog, also eats the rat, also gets his energy from the wolf. So this is an interconnected number of many food chains interconnected. They're interconnected because one plant can be, one plant can be like you see here, the lavenders are also, the butterfly also eats the lavender, also eats the flowering plant. So these many food chains, when they're interconnected, gives you a food web. Now please pause the video here and have a look at this diagram. This is a very nice diagram giving you a whole lot of other stuff which is very food chain, just one path of energy. And here we have a quaternary consumer as well. So as I said, producer, there's no such thing as primary, so just producers, first trophic level, primary consumer, secondary consumer, tertiary, and then quaternary consumer, which is the fifth trophic level. And then you can see all these interconnected food webs, and it tells you the arrow points to the eater and shows the transfer of energy. So the arrow which is going out, like from the plant, it is going to this herbivore. Then from the herbivore is going to the carnivore. Then of course they're all carnivores after that. So the arrow which goes out, you can see the arrows going out, like for instance here the arrow. So that means the energy in this plant is actually transferred to this rabbit when the rabbit eats the grass. So the arrow points to the eater and shows the transfer of energy. So then all possible energy paths, and this is a food web. So pause the video and have a look at this. Now this is just one food chain. A flower producer, caterpillar, then the caterpillar, then the frog, and then the snake, and then the owl. So one food chain. Now let's look at this food chain. Now of course you will see many food chains, and if you just put in the Google search food chain, you can come up with quite a few examples, and very relevant examples which is understandable to you. Now food chain shows the transfer of energy within an ecosystem. A food chain doesn't tell you which organism eats which, but it tells you the transfer of energy within an ecosystem. And energy is transferred from one organism, is transferred between organisms, and one organism eats another. Like when you eat an apple, but you're getting an energy from the apple. When you eat a piece of chicken, you're getting the energy from that piece of chicken which was cooked and you've eaten that. So energy is transferred between organisms. A food chain is a simple linear series of steps, while a food web is more complex. So basically a food chain tells you the energy transfer. Now if you're on a diet, you will eat a boiled potato, but if you're not on a diet, you'll eat fries. Why? Because potatoes will be put in oil and fried, but that will have more energy. But if you have a piece of boiled potato, that's not going to have a lot of energy. It's going to have some energy, yes, but not if you have fried it and it's got some oil on it as well. So basically when you eat something, when any organism eats anything else, it's going to get the energy from that. Now let's look at the syllabus once again. Now the first point which I want to talk about is producer. Producer is an organism that makes its own organic nutrients, usually using energy from sunlight through photosynthesis. Second definition is consumer. Consumer is an organism that gets its energy by feeding on other organisms. You are a primary consumer when you're eating an apple. You're a secondary consumer when you're eating a piece of chicken, because the chicken must have eaten some grain or some grass or something, and then now you're eating the chicken, so you're a secondary consumer. Herbivore, an animal that obtains its energy by eating plants. Carnivore is an animal that obtains its energy by eating other animals. Now, decomposer is not part of the food chain, please remember that. Decomposer is an organism that obtains its energy from dead or waste organic matter. Food chain, a chart showing the flow of energy, food from one organism to the next, beginning with the producer. And please remember, in this neither do we add the decomposers, so no decomposers. And we do not talk about the sun, so no sun either, because sun is the major source of energy, and that is the first point of the syllabus. State that sun is the principal source of energy input into biological systems, and this is what we need to talk about a little more. So neither do we write in a food chain, neither do we write about the sun, and nor do we write about the decomposers. Next we come to the pyramids of numbers and pyramids of biomass. Now you see here I've given you an example of pyramid of numbers and a pyramid of biomass. So what we've got to understand is pyramid of numbers is basically an horizontal bar chart, and you can see the number of we give you in the pyramid of numbers, we give you a number of lettuce plants. Say there were 1,000 lettuce plants here. Now maybe there are about 700 snails which live on it. and maybe there are another 500 thrush which live on it, and then maybe we have 50 sparrowhawks that live on it. So this gives us the numbers, pyramid of numbers. Then we have one tree, one elder tree. Elder tree is, just remember, it's a tree. So one tree, and then on that we have, say, maybe 10,000 or maybe more than that aphids, and then we have, say, about 5,000 of those, and then we have maybe 500 starlings on it. But the same pyramid of numbers, if we draw a pyramid of biomass, the tree biomass will be huge. The mass of the tree will be huge. So the same now, this is a pyramid of numbers and this is the same pyramid of biomass. So the mass of the tree would be huge, and then of course the mass of the aphids would be a little, much lesser, and then the lace wings and the starlings. So you have to know the difference between the pyramid of numbers and the pyramid of biomass. And we'll just do a few more examples and maybe it will become a little better to you as you go along. Now this is another diagram showing you the pyramids of numbers. Basic pyramid represents the number of organisms at each trophic level. Now can display different patterns depending on the type of ecosystem represent. Now here you see you have this producer with 100,000 individuals. Then the first level is 50,000 and the second is 10,000 and then 500. Like grass plants, there will be many grass plants, and then we'll have many deers, and then we'll have maybe something else which lives on the deers, and then something which lives on that. So this is one type. Then another one is which we have one tree. Now this one tree can only be depicted as a very small line or a triangle, and then you have 100 bugs, squirrels, birds, and then there's one owl. So there is no set pattern of pyramid of numbers. It can be an inverted pyramid or it can be a normal pyramid as well. Pyramid of numbers, because you see when we talk of one tree, then we're going to only depict that as one line. And then you have another bar on top of it. Then you have another bar on top of it, another bar on top of it. And this one is actually that one tree which we are depicting. Another example of pyramid of numbers, many clover plants, few snails, few thrush, few tertiary consumers. Now as we look at this pyramid of biomass, biomass is the amount of living thing available to the next level in a food chain, the mass of material in living organisms. And it is the total mass without the mass of water, so that is called the dry mass in grams. Pyramids of biomass show how much energy is available at levels in a food chain, how much food is available in an oak tree, and then how much food is available in a caterpillar, and then in a bird, and then finally in a sparrowhawk. So pyramids of biomass is actually a mass, the dry mass, because the water content can vary from different organisms, maybe 70% in one, 75% in the other. But the dry mass is the one which is going to be providing the energy. Dry mass means the organic matter, the cell wall, the cell membrane, the organic molecules in it. If they are enzymes, they are organic molecules, they are proteins. Now when we eat, maybe when we eat an apple, we are eating plant cells, and the plant cells have a cell wall which we cannot digest, but it contains in the cytoplasm, there are enzymes. So when we are eating plant matter, we're getting a little bit of protein, we're getting a little bit of carbohydrates, we're getting a few sugars, glucose, fructose. But that is all the organic matter. The water, of course, is good to us, but it can't provide any energy. Now, another explanation for the pyramid of biomass is ecologists draw a pyramid of biomass by weighing all the organisms at each stage of the food chain. And the mass of the producers is larger than the mass of the consumers to give a typical pyramid shape. Another example of pyramid of number or pyramid of biomass, why? You can see this has to be the one with the number because this is one tree. So this is one little notch here. And then this would be the mass of the tree. So So herbivores, carnivores. So you could understand that this would be the pyramid of numbers, and this would be the pyramid of biomass. Now let's look at the A part of the syllabus. The chapter A part states that the sun is the principal source of energy input to biological systems. Now what does that mean? Biology means life. Now as we've just looked at all the food chains, there has to be basically a producer. All food chains start with a producer, and producer has to be an autotroph. Autotroph means that it has to convert some form of energy. Now in this case we're going to talk about light energy. So it converts light energy into chemical energy. So without the sun we would be totally lost. The sun is actually going to provide all the producers with the light energy, which they are going to convert into the glucose molecule, which is the chemical energy. So all biological systems totally depend on the sun, but please remember, we do not add this to the food chain. We can be asked a question on it, but we don't add this and we don't write it in the food chain. Now the second point of the syllabus is the non-cyclical nature of energy flow. Now what does that mean? I mean, you're going to be studying two other cycles. We're going to be studying the carbon cycle. We're going to study the nitrogen cycle. How these carbon and nitrogen will be returned back to the atmosphere, used up by something, and then again returned back. So it is recycled. But why can energy not be recycled? There's a very important reason which you need to understand. First of all, the energy source is the sun. Sun passes it on to producer, producer passes it on to consumer. Now how can the consumer pass it back to the sun? That is not possible. So all the energy which we are getting, all the energy input into biological system is actually the sun. But then things can't go back to the sun. You can't be taking back the energy back to the sun. So that's not possible. When you eat an apple, you get energy from it. When you eat a piece of chicken, you get the energy from it, but you can't return it to anyway. Now, when a lion eats a deer, he eats the flesh of the deer, but when the lion's been going around hunting, all that energy is lost to the atmosphere as heat energy. So we're losing heat all the time, and that energy cannot be returned either back to the sun or to the producer somehow. We can't return that energy back to the producer. So please understand the non-cyclical nature of energy flow. Now let's look at the D part of the syllabus. It says energy losses between trophic levels. Describe energy losses between trophic levels. Now what does that mean? Why is energy lost between trophic levels? Now for instance, let's look at a plant. This whole plant has 100 kilojoules of energy. Now why is it that you only will get 10 kilojoules of it? First of all, you don't eat the whole plant. Like in a mango tree, you only eat the fruit. Or an apple tree, you only eat the fruit. You don't eat the trunk, the stem, the bark, the leaves. Then something else like carrots, you only eat the root. You don't eat the stem and the leaves. While in spinach, you only eat the leaves. You don't eat the root and the stem. So this whole plant, if I had dug this whole plant out of the soil and I burnt it, it will probably give me 100 kilojoules of energy. But why do I only get 10 kilojoules? Because I don't eat the whole plant. Number one, I don't eat the whole plant. Number two, if I even eat the plant matter, which is the leaves or the stem or the root, I cannot even digest the cellulose and the lignin. So that is also going to be passed out undigested. So energy losses between trophic levels. So basically, when you're eating any plant matter, you haven't eaten the whole plant. You're just eating an apple, which is just a fruit. The whole tree is still there, the apple tree. Now similarly, when you're eating a piece of chicken, well, you're not eating the whole chicken. You may be eating just the flesh, but you haven't eaten the feathers, you haven't eaten the intestines. That still has energy. If you took off the feathers and you burnt them, that would release heat and light. Similarly, the intestines you don't eat. Similarly, the feet, the chicken feet you don't eat. So many part of the animal we don't eat. Like the skin of the animal, the hide of the animal, we don't eat. So this is still has energy in it. So energy losses between trophic levels will also occur when you are talking of primary consumer, when you're consuming producer. You will also talk about it when we are a secondary consumer. Just like when you're eating a chicken, you're actually a secondary consumer. Why? Because the chicken ate some grass and then you're eating the chicken now. Or when you're eating some, say, mutton, goat or lamb meat, that goat or lamb ate some grass. So you are the secondary consumer. Now you don't eat the whole animal. So energy losses between trophic levels. The last point that I want to discuss with you is infer the advantages of short food chains. Now, when, for instance, if you are a primary consumer, means you are a herbivore. If you are a herbivore means that you are straight around, you are in the second trophic level. You're eating an apple or you're eating a salad which is made up of maybe lettuce, apple, olives, and there is nothing in the intermediate. You're just the consumer, the primary consumer, and you are eating the producer. So nothing has been lost. But imagine if you're a secondary consumer, then the primary consumer ate some food which was wasted a lot because the whole of the leaf is not eaten or the whole of the plant is not eaten. So that plant also is destroyed. Like when you put grass for sheep, it's not going to eat all the grass. So it's a lot of food is wasted. And then it takes many days for that animal to grow to a size in which you can then slaughter it and market the meat of the animal. So short food chains are beneficial because there are not many energy losses. So being a primary consumer or being a herbivore is better than being a secondary consumer or a carnivore, because a lot of food and other will have been wasted in bringing up these animals. So advantages of short food chains. So that finishes this video, which is the video 1 on ecology, in which we have covered A, B, C, D and E of the syllabus, of the first part of the syllabus on. So we've done A, B, C, D and E part of the syllabus. In the next video we will do the carbon cycle and the nitrogen cycle. Best of luck and thank you.